The bar chart challenge is one that I found in a CoderPad article, this one right here. It works like this. Given a set of word frequencies, these words down here, render a bar chart showing the frequency of each word in the set. No third-party libraries, just use plain JavaScript and CSS to get it done. And of course, a line saying that, hey, the words are already provided for you. You don't have to fetch them from anywhere. At its core, it's a DOM rendering exercise, getting the information from here to display over here. But I really like this challenge for a couple reasons. On the one hand, many exercises like this have candidates render the data in either a list or a table. That doesn't allow for a lot of flexibility. It's really just either a list or a table. But with this challenge, we're in a position where we get to select all of the markup for our display. That can lead to a lot of variation in semantics and accessibility, and can lead to some fun conversations that let the candidate shine. The second part of this is, what is our high watermark? And when I talk about that, what I mean is, if we have a bar that extends left to right, right here, at some point the bar is going to fill out with whatever it is. What is our maximum number? If we set it to 100, 100 makes sense, right? Then we could do 29% for React. But that, considering that React is the highest number in this set, the largest number in this set, that means that there's going to be a lot of white space in here, a lot of unused space. On the other side, if it is 100 and React suddenly becomes 129, now it's way over the maximum number. So magic numbers aren't really going to work for us. We need something better. And my advice is to use what we have. So we're going to find a way to use this data. And that is going to be the first part of this video. So this is going to be a two-part video where the first part, we're going to explore how to get that high watermark. And then in the second video, we're going to explore rendering it to the DOM, right? So here we go, opening this right up. We're going to get in here. We aren't going to use this preview right at the moment. Instead, we're going to open up the console in CoderPad or wherever you're working, and we're going to start. So like most things, we're going to start really, really old school. And the original way that we had to do this was with something called for in. It's a for loop that allows us to loop through keys of an object. There are some newer ways to do this, but they are newer. So let's explore the first one first, okay? Right here, I have a max number, just like this. I'm going to set it to 0. That's going to be our starting place, and then we are going to update this, which is why we're using let, okay? So for let key in word frequencies, and I'm just going to copy that so I don't mistype it for the millionth time. Then, if max number is less than word frequencies key, because here's the key, here's the reason, okay? Key is just the property name. It's not the value. So we still need to reach in and get that value, which is why we're using this here. Now, if max num, spell it right, is less than word frequency, then we should replace max num with whatever word frequency is. So max num equals word frequencies key, right? We're going to get that value and we're going to put it right in there. And if I do this, console log max num, run it. Where's my run? Right there. And over here we should get 29, which is exactly that. That's the high watermark, right? So really easy, really fast. Didn't take as much time. There are cleaner ways now, okay? And there's actually a gotcha in here. So right now, nothing about this would mess up your code. But there are times where maybe you're fetching this data, or maybe this data comes from an element that is already on screen, and there might be extra stuff in here. So taking a look at that really fast, if I console log word frequencies, okay? And I run this again, run. We're gonna see that object, okay? But if I jump into my developer tools and open that object, we get the same thing. And right here, we have something called the prototype. And if you've never used the prototype, every single thing in JavaScript has a prototype. It is the thing that this object will be based on. Kind of like classes, but not really classes, okay? Inside of here are a bunch of methods currently, right? So nothing in here should affect it because these methods don't get sent through that loop. But if there was a property in here, it absolutely would. And we can prove that using this. So right here, word frequencies __ proto. This is a special word that gets to that prototype or recreates that prototype for us. And we're going to create an object that has test 45, okay? So test 45, right like this, we run it and we get, once it's all done, we get 45. Except that there's no 45 in the object, right? And if we go back to here, there's also no 45 in this object, but if you now if you look inside a prototype, we get test 45. So the for loop, the for in, brings in properties from the prototype, and we don't really want that. So the way around that is with an extra bit inside of here. And that bit is the object, and then we go has own property. And this will ensure that we only ever get stuff that is inside of this object itself, nothing from the prototype. So we run this again, run up here, and once it goes through the hurdles, we should get 29 again, okay? And the same over here. So was 29, then 45 when we got the prototype. Now it's back to 29. And the prototype still has that 45. So again, not something that would affect this specific challenge, but very important to remember that if we are looping like this with for in, it might just be picking up things from your prototype. And if you're seeing odd behavior, that's probably the first place you want to look. Okay? Moving on, let's try something different. I'm going to comment this out and start again. So this one, we're going to use const. Okay? Const max num. We're just going to do it. And this time we are going to get the values as an array. Because using newer JavaScript, ES6 and newer, we have access to object.values. Inside of there, we can do word frequencies. If I run this right now, clear it out, run it, I should get an array right there. I'm going to hide this one because we don't need that anymore. So just the array. All the numbers in there, we can do stuff. In fact, we could sort this, and if we run that again, you might think that this is a great way to do it, but sort is alphabetical, which means that it goes by the first number, not the whole number, which is why 5, even though it's smaller than 11, is all the way on the end, because it is bigger than 2. The cool thing here is that we can pass in a callback, and it will take a first argument and a second argument. And the first and the second will be whatever two numbers it is comparing in that moment, or whatever two items it is comparing at that moment, because you could use this for a special alphabetical sort too, okay? But inside of here, we go b minus a. Oh, sorry, with the arrow function. Let's do that proper. And now if I run this, I should get, there it is, in descending order. So 29 all the way down to 5. That's exactly what we would want. We can also switch this around to be a minus b and run it. And now it will be in ascending order. So the way that this works is it will return either a positive number, a negative number, or a 0. If it's a 0, then the sort won't do anything. It'll leave those two things alone and just move on to the next in its loop cycle. If it's negative, it will move it one way. If it's positive, it'll move it the other way. Okay, so it's constantly shuffling these around until they are in our final order. And now that they are in our final order, we can just grab that item, run it, and we get 29. And that's exactly where we want to be. If we had gone with the first one where it was descending order, then this would be shift. And that would pull off the very first item. Because it's the last, we use pop, and it just works. This is great, except for the fact that we're using two different methods to get it done. I think we can clean that up a little bit. Let's comment this out. Jump on down, const max num equals, I'm just going to grab this because we're going to use it a lot. So right there, and we're going to use reduce. Now, I've mentioned in previous videos that reduce is the power, okay? And what I mean by that is it can do a lot of stuff really well. So the more comfortable you get with reduce, the better your programming career is going to be, okay? Or at least the better your code might feel, okay? So reduce takes a function as well. It actually takes two arguments. So the first one is our callback function, and the second is what's called the accumulator, okay? We can set this to 0. We can set it to anything we want because we're going to reset it pretty quick here. And then inside of the callback, we get a bunch of different arguments. The only two we need is the first one, the accumulator itself, which is going to be 0 to start. And the second one is going to be whatever our current value is. So whether it's 5 or 11 or 13 or whatever it is, okay? So we're going to pass that in. And then down here, we're going to return something. We always return something, and that something gets put into the accumulator. So we could do addition here if we want to sum a bunch of numbers. We could do some sort of weird Fibonacci. In this case, we're just going to return either the accumulator or the number, whichever one is bigger, okay? So if the accumulator is less than the number, then we return the number. Otherwise, the accumulator is bigger than the number and we return the accumulator, okay? We can run this again and we get another 29 right down here, which is exactly what we would expect. And now we've done it with one less method. Before we had sort and pop, this time we only have reduce. You might say, well, it's 3 lines. If I had sorted this properly with the curly brackets in here, then this would be 3 lines too. So it's about the same length. It's just easier to read if I wrap it, okay? This is all fine and good, but there are easier ways. Let's take another look. Right down here, we have const max num. We're going to start using math, okay? On math, there are a lot of helper methods. One of them is max. And max takes a bunch of different arguments and returns the biggest one. So we could have 2, 3, I don't know, 67, 5, and it would return 67. So if we could, we could just pass that in, but there's a problem here. And the problem is that object.values is an array. It's not a series of arguments, it's a single argument, okay? And so this out of the box is not going to work. Now I'm going to take the long road to get there because I love teaching, okay? We can start off by using something called apply. And apply goes hand in hand with bind and something else called call. It allows you to pass in a unique this, so whatever your this keyword is targeting, you can pass that in. You can also pass in either a series of arguments or, in this case, an array of arguments, and it will break it apart and pass them into the max, okay? So for now, we don't actually have a this, we can just use null. And now we can use that object values, okay? So we've reduced it down to be max. We are applying our array, so it is going to break those out into individual arguments. And if we run this, we get a third 29, which is exactly what we want, okay? Just to prove the point, I could, in fact, use this with, with call, okay? Call expects a series of arguments. So again, 5, 7, 79, 3, 100, whatever it is. We could do that. Or, because we're here, we could actually spread this array and get individual arguments. So call, just like this. In fact, if you're not sure why, when you would use call apply versus bind, okay? Bind returns a new function. It doesn't call that function, it just creates a new function bound to this, whatever that keyword this is, okay? Whereas apply and call actually trigger the function. So that's what we're doing here. We're triggering it with that data. We've spread it out. We get another 29. We are good. Now, of course, the problem with this is if we're just spreading here anyway, why wouldn't we just spread inside of these? So if we go and paste this in one more time, we get rid of apply and null, replace that, spread it out again, and now we are just spreading that array in as arguments to max. We hit run again, and we get a fifth 29, and lots of changes go away. So a fifth 29, which means that we are in really good shape. We've reduced it basically down to nothing, okay? And we're getting the number that we want, which is great. There's one more thing that I want to do here, okay? Before we wrap up and review. This 29 will get the job done. If you want to move on from here, you can. To me, it's not really a clean number. And when I say clean, I mean easy to remember. Whenever I'm looking at charts that end in these, end in something that isn't a 5 or a 0, at least for me, it feels very uncomfortable. So I would like to make this 30. And the reason for that is just because it looks a little bit nicer in charts, okay? So we can do that really fast using something similar right here. Bar max equals, and again, we're going to use math, okay? So on that math, we're going to use something called ceil. Ceil is short for ceiling, which means that we are moving up, not down. If we were using round, that could go up or down based on where the number is, okay? But ceiling allows us to only move up. So it'll always go to the next biggest number. Now it does require a decimal, a floating number, okay? Which means that we need to change this a little bit. We have 29 right now, it's already an integer, which means that we can't round it. It's already rounded, right? But what we could do is we could take that max num and we could divide it by 10. 29 divided by 10 is 2.9, okay? And then when it rounds it up using ceil, it will be 3. 3 doesn't really help us, but we can multiply that by 10 outside of the parentheses. So the final result, multiply by 10, and we get 30. I can test that right here. Console log bar max, just like this. Run that again, and I should get 29 and 30. So at this point, we're in really good shape. We have everything that we need to do the math when we're creating our bar chart, okay? Let's review what we've done. We started off with just a random series of words, okay? And we wanted to get the largest number because that's going to be how we calculate our high watermark, okay? We started off by looking at the very traditional for in loop. For in allows us to loop over keys of an object. And what we found was that worked quite well until something was hiding in the prototype. As soon as something was hiding in the prototype, we need to do just a little bit extra with this has own property. which lets us filter out those keys so that we're only getting stuff from our actual object. We took that further we changed it up. We didn't take that further, but we changed it up so that we could just sort it and then pull a piece of it off, whatever that is, the largest or the smallest. In this case, the largest number, right? And that worked quite well. But it has two different filters here, the sort, or two different methods, not filters. Two different methods, sort and pop. So we reduce that down to, well, reduce, right? We reduced it down to 1, called reduce. And inside of there, we just said, hey, if the last number is smaller than the current number, then update to the current number, otherwise keep the last number. That's what that is doing. And then from there, of course, we use the math class, right? It's not really a class, but we used math and the max property on there to figure it out. And we jumped through some hoops here just for a little extra learning using apply. Apply allows you to pass in a custom this along with an array of values, okay? And it will break that array of values apart. It will spread that for you. Call will allow you to pass in a series of arguments. So we had to spread that out. And since we were just spreading that out, we went all the way back to max and we just spread it there. So we didn't have to worry about the custom this word. And then to finish out, we cleaned it up a little bit so that we have this nice even-ish number, okay? Ends in a 0. It's easier to do mental math that way. So just prepping for the next one. And that's that. So in the next one, we're going to look at taking all of this along with our object and rendering it out as a custom bar chart, as a series of bar charts that flow down the page from left to right. It's going to be pretty cool. There are a lot of options there too. I'm looking forward to it. If you have any questions or comments about this one, please do put them in the comments and I will try to answer them as quickly as possible. Otherwise, I will see you very, very soon.